Welcome everyone to the October 1st meeting of the Planning Resource and Development Committee. We have several supervisors, committee members who are not able to be present today. Supervisor Morehouse and Supervisor Kinnear, I think, are not able to be here for various reasons. But we have a quorum, so we'll plow forward and get done what we can. First item would be the approval of the minutes from the September 17th meeting. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Is
I'll
there a
second.
second? Motion and a second. Any corrections or revisions? All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Minutes are approved. So we have public comment periods. We have sort of two. I don't really care if people flop over a little bit from one to the other, but the first one is just general public hearing, public comments that would relate to tonight's agenda. And then the second would be any comments that are more related to the comprehensive farmland planning update. So anyone have anything they want to contribute from the citizenry? Bob, you want to?
At this time?
I think it'd be good to raise your topic at this time, yeah.
All right. My name is Bob Cook. I'm the chairman of Town of Red Cedar. And I would like to bring up a topic for consideration in the county, what do you call a plan now? Comp plan?
Comprehensive plan.
What does the county plan to do to protect farmland as far as from data centers, investors from outside of the area, eastern part of the state, especially where there's lots of money? And these aren't just taking small tracts of land, 10 acres, 20 acres, 40. We just experienced 300 and some acre, the best farmland in Dunn County and in the northern part of the state to be pulled out of agriculture, and it'll be covered with buildings. So I want to know, is there something in the comp plan that will help protect the towns and the community? Because Dunn County prides itself in being a rural agricultural county. A great deal of our economic development has been through agriculture, and all the residents benefit from this. And if you ask anyone that lives outside of the city, they like the rural living atmosphere. They like the farmland. They like the trees, the crops, the changing of the season. They don't live in the city because they don't want that house upon house feel. What I'd like for the county to do is propose a moratorium countywide, just as they had done with the sand mines, to buy us time to look into more information about these things. As of right now, we know very, very little about what is going to be happening very soon. The mayor has voiced his opinion on it. There have been a lot of meetings that the residents are upset about and have been attending. You can all see the signs going up. But I wanted to express my opinion on behalf of the town of Red Cedar that we need to slow this thing down. And I think the best way is with a countywide moratorium. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. Well, this will undoubtedly be, this general topic will be part of our discussion as we go forward. So thank you for raising that. And any other public comments at this point in time? So we'll go through some of the items that are identified as elements of the comprehensive plan today. And the committee has been reasonably sort of open to including relevant comments from the citizens while we're doing that without it getting a kind of taking up too much of our time. But so we hopefully can provide that as we get into those discussions. Let's see. We have no public hearing today, so let's proceed to 7A staff reports. Comprehensive plan, review, discussion, and provide feedback.
Okay. Well, good morning. Susan Badke with Regional Planning. Nice to see you all again. I think it was, we met last month and back here in front of you today. Hopefully you had an opportunity to review the memo and the materials that were included in your packet. I also have printed them out at your and placed them at your place. What we're focusing on today, and I'm not gonna go through, you're all aware of comprehensive planning. We've talked about those 9 elements. Today, we're going to focus our conversation and discussion really on 2 specific elements, housing and intergovernmental cooperation. And you might recall we had kind of a detailed work session on intergovernmental cooperation a few meetings ago. And what I'm bringing before you now today is draft goals, objectives, policies, and strategies, those GOPs, based on our conversation. Again, this is draft information. I'm looking for your feedback, your input. Do these goals, objectives, policy, strategies reflect what you'd like it to from a county-wide standpoint? To be included in that plan. So as you review things, if there are things that, I've worked closely with Tammy here, your planner, to arrive at some draft goals, objectives, policy, strategies. But as we're having conversations today, certainly if there are things that you don't like, let me know. If there's things that you're thinking should be included, but are not currently included in the draft, let me know. This is your opportunity. I'd really like your input. So we're going to dive on in first into maybe. Oh, I guess let's see here. I don't know how we advance. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we're going to start talking about population and housing. And it's, when we talk about housing, you kind of have to look at your population, your demographic trends, your economic trends. So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I do think this warrants just some kind of overview of some of the data. So before you, and many of you have maybe seen this handout. This is a Dunn County housing snapshot. The original snapshot was included in the 2023 housing needs assessment that the county conducted. I assisted with that effort. It was most recently updated to include some more recent data. So our most recent data from the census is a average sample spanning from 2019 to 2023, that 5-year period. So I have updated that. Again, a copy is at your place if you want to take a closer look. Might be a little small on the screen. That was presented at, and that updated housing snapshot was prepared for and presented at the Dunn County Housing Partner Summit that was held. So a bunch of folks interested in housing and kind of working on housing initiatives in the county, including your economic development coordinator, kind of came together and to explore housing issues and potential solutions in Dunn County. So you could see that data. I'm not going to go into detail on everything that's in there because we could spend a whole day, and I'd love to do that, but I'm going to be respectful of your time. So real quickly, where we're at in terms of housing, in terms of the county's overall housing stock, and this includes, your city and your villages as well. It's county-wide data. So in terms of kind of that breakdown of rental and owner split, we're at about 33% of your housing is in rental housing. Per that census data, about 65% is owner housing. You have about 2% of seasonal. So not a huge amount of your housing stock is for seasonal or kind of recreational uses. Of course, the further north you go, when you get into like Barron County, that seasonal housing makes up a higher percentage of housing stock. One of the key metrics that we look at when we're looking at housing need and housing demand is your vacancy rates. Okay. Rental vacancy rate, the decennial census showed that rental vacancy at about 5%. What I heard through interviews back in 2023 was that seemed a little bit high. And what the vacancy rates mean is how much housing is available for rent or for sale. So if I'm looking to move to Dunn County and I'm looking for a place to either buy or to rent, how much of the market is, how much of the stock is available for me to buy or to rent? Again, back in 2020, about 5%. The most recent estimates came back at about about 4%. Keeping in mind there is a margin of error, right? Those estimates, there's a margin of error of about 1.9%. So the healthy standard for rental vacancy is about 5 to 7%. So if anything, you're probably just below that healthy standard. There could be a need for some additional rental housing. On the owner side of things, your owner vacancy rate is much lower. 2020 decennial census showed it at 0.8%. The most recent kind of estimates that we have is about 0.2% plus or minus 0.1%. So again, that owner availability of how much, if I'm out looking for a home for sale, how much is out there, very low. The healthy standard for owner vacancy rate is about 2 to 2.5%. And I have that listed on there. So if you want to reference that. So in terms of what, owner stock, owner housing in the county, and what's available for sale, very low compared to that healthy standard and what's generally considered healthy. Now, you don't want to go too far above that, right? Because then you're tipping the scale. Then you're having too much housing available on the market, and kind of there's a surplus of housing. In terms of overcrowding, that's one of the things that metrics we look at in terms of demand, right? If you have too many people in one housing unit, we like to compare our counties to the state to see where they fit. Generally, as of 2020 in the county, rental housing had a little bit less overcrowding rate than the state. Owner was estimated to be a little bit higher than the state. So when we do calculate housing demand projections, we try to account for that, right? If you have overcrowding, and the definition of overcrowding is if you have more than one person per room in a dwelling unit, then you're considered to be overcrowded. So we try to account for that. So those are just some highlights from that table. You can see kind of a full breakdown of the various metrics and the various data pieces that go into assessing the county's housing market. Housing costs, you can see, both on the charts there, housing costs from 2020 to 2024. So looking at just that kind of 4 or 5 year time period, median sale price, and this data comes from the Wisconsin Realtors Association, so it's based on actual sales, not census data estimates, right? Median sale price in the county has increased about 42%. Median rent for a 2-bedroom unit, and that's based on this rentdata.org. It's a source that we look at. That has increased about 25%. So our housing costs, not surprising probably to anyone in this room, especially if you have someone who is looking for housing. Those housing costs have increased significantly. And that's not unique to Dunn County. It's not unique to the state of Wisconsin. Nationwide, lack of available housing. So inventory is low and housing costs have gone up. So again, not unique to housing. Housing costs have increased at a much higher rate than household incomes as well. One of the things that we did for the Dunn County kind of Housing Partners Summit was take a look. When we talk about housing, right, it really influences many folks. And you can look at it from many different aspects and angles and lenses. So in 2023, the housing needs assessment was really a result of your health needs assessment, pointing to housing as kind of a critical health need. So it really stemmed from kind of a social determinant of health, but it also is a workforce, related to the workforce, right? If we want to grow our jobs and maintain and retain and attract workforce, as we are an aging population, how do we bring in some younger folks to kind of backfill those that are exiting our workforce? We need to take a look at our jobs, what our median wages are and what folks can afford as it relates to housing. So when we talk about the workforce housing, right, well, what are those jobs? So one of the things that I did in coordination with your economic development coordinator was to look at what are those jobs, kind of some of the, top occupations in the county along with some others, right? So when we talk about our workforce, what are our teachers? What's the median wages of our teachers, firefighters, assembly folks, police and sheriff, nurses, right? All folks that we want living and working in our communities. And then we overlaid that with the area median income. And I won't go into too much detail on that. But area median income is determined annually by the federal government, Housing and Urban Development. And it is often used as kind of a basis for federal housing assistance programs, right? So if you're at a certain percentage of AMI, you might qualify for some housing assistance. Typically, those programs are when you're less than 80% of AMI. So we took a single, job occupation and overlaid that on top of Dunn County's AMI, area median income, for a one-person family to see how those jobs, where those fell on that spectrum. And you can see, for example, elementary school teachers, the median. So again, median meaning 50% make less than that, 50% make more than that. The median elementary school teacher in Dunn County is estimated to be around 56,000. That's between 80 and 100% AMI. And so there are folks, the workforce population, to find housing. It's very difficult for them, to find housing that's at that price point. So we just need to keep that in mind and consider that when we're talking about workforce housing. I think that as I talk with our communities and our counties on housing, this is the graphic that draws the most interest because it really puts into perspective what we mean. And this is all different for every community, every county, right? So if I did this for the city of Menominee, it's going to look very different than the village of Boyceville, right? Because our occupations, our industries, our wages are different. Again, this is county level data, but I do think it's important, and it really shows that many of the top occupations are not making 100% of that area median income. Now, if you have two folks in your household that are both working, right, you have two incomes, these numbers change. This is just a one-to-one kind of perspective. So one job, one income, and a one-person household. So I just wanted to share that with you. We also in Dunn County have an aging housing stock. Approximately 48% of the housing stock in the county was built prior to 1980. Now I've probably mentioned this before. You've heard me say that just because you have an older home, right? We have many beautiful historic homes that can be well maintained and cared for, but we do like to take a look at the age of our housing just because it can indicate some deteriorating conditions. And our existing housing stock is our most affordable housing stock, right? Regardless of where you are. If it's existing, it's the most affordable and most attainable. And so it is important that we take a look at, conditions. Now, similarly, you might have a 10-year-old home, right? And if it's not you could have deteriorating conditions on that too if you're not maintaining it properly. Where this has come up, specifically where this came up in the housing needs assessment conversation was some of the student rentals, right, in the city, down near the university, perhaps, and not saying it's just in it's countywide, right? We probably have some housing conditions that maybe are not suitable for living, but yeah, keeping in mind different populations and that we do need to take a look and consider that. Any questions on the data so far? Okay, so we also take a look when we're looking at and assessing your housing needs, housing conditions, right? So state statute requires that we assess the county's kind of housing conditions, and that's where all of this data feeds into, right? Getting a real good handle on what's the current kind of state or condition or assessment of your housing. We also look at various housing plans, and I'm not going to spend too much time, but I mentioned and alluded to that community housing or community health needs assessment report that was done in 2019, again, indicated that safe and quality housing is kind of a weakness throughout Dunn County, and folks do have concerns as it relates to, the conditions of our housing. That led to the housing needs assessment in 2023. There were 5 kind of goals or key goals, overarching goals, address the county's existing unmet housing demand. So that gets to availability. What's our inventory? Have we kept up with, housing demand in terms of housing supply? Creating a balanced housing market for opportunities for all households. So taking that housing for all approach, encouraging quality housing, striving to provide shelter for all, and then educating, collaborating, and advocating. So there were kind of 5 kind of key goals that were identified or recommended goals identified in that housing needs assessment. 2024 community health assessment, guess what? Housing's still in there, right? And so unsafe or affordable housing, they list out, they had done a survey, what the data shows. And so housing still is, an ongoing kind of area that, at least from the community health needs assessment, is still kind of an area of priority, perhaps to consider for the county. In the city of Menominee, right? And Menominee's part of the larger county. You have you don't have regulatory kind of authority in the city of Menominee, but there was a group, GROW, who conducted a community report, and again specific to the city of Menominee. Key findings you can see there: affordability crisis, limited availability, declining quality, homelessness, systemic barriers. They had some proposed solutions, so you can see some kind of recurring themes, right? We have availability, we have affordability, we have quality, right? And housing for all. So that would include those that are unhoused, or those kind of in, housing instability, unstable housing situations. 2010 Dunn County Land Use Plan. I just kind of note the pages there. Of course, housing, as I mentioned, it's a required element. You folks know that, of the comp plan. It shares some housing data, programs, and some goals, objectives, policies. And I'm going to show those here before we get into the what is recommended or drafted, I guess, for this plan update. We also have, as I've mentioned before, we're taking a look at municipal comprehensive plans that have been conducted and completed in the last 10 years, because those plans are what we'll consider recent. If they were done, 15, 12 years ago, more than 10 years ago, they're outdated and really should be re-examined and updated. So a few things through our research and kind of compiling, issues and kind of goals and objectives from those municipal comprehensive plans, a few key things came out. So limited resources. So from our town's perspective, and this was specific to town comprehensive plans that we looked at, they identified limited resources. So limited staff, funding, organizational capacity to kind of focus on housing, right? Most often in your towns, you have a town clerk and you have your town board chair, and they have a million other things going on, right? The town clerk might be part-time, working on elections, working on all of your committees. And so just the resources to kind of focus efforts on kind of housing policy or housing development, it's just not kind of a high priority item for them. Lack of housing variety. So recognizing in our towns that our single family home is kind of, that's our standard. Now we have to balance that with our kind of, and we talked about this at our last meeting, our desire for rural character, right? And what that means. So there's always a balancing and lots of things that go together. Need for senior-friendly housing. So we've talked previously, and I could certainly pull up data to show you where our age projections are headed, right? The county is projected to grow, see that 65 plus age group grow significantly in the next 25 years, but really more so in the near term out to 2030, 2035. That 65 plus, those baby boomers are expected to grow nationwide. From a city village standpoint, lack of vacant lots for residential development. So just not the land, and I think it's a culmination of land available, but also land that's ready, right? So land that has infrastructure service to it. I can think when I worked with the village of Boyceville, for example, Boyceville's in a unique position. They own a decent amount of land, but it's not surfaced. It doesn't have the infrastructure. It doesn't have the roads, the sewer, the water, and that's a challenge for the village. How do we get that infrastructure in place? We could pay for it, but guess what? That's very expensive, and infrastructure costs, as you folks know, have continued to increase significantly, and just since 2020, since the pandemic hit. Aging housing stock, deteriorating housing conditions. I'm not going to, we talked about that a bit here, not going to elaborate on that. But again, recognizing that's an area, an item, a kind of an issue that is noted and recognized in your municipal comprehensive plan. So you could see again, kind of those overlapping themes based on the data, the various data pieces that we're pulling. Countywide survey results. Top 3 housing related challenges. And these are the survey results that were everyone had the opportunity to complete online, right? So this was an online survey that was conducted at the beginning of our process. Top 3 housing related challenges: cost of buying a home, cost of land or lots, and cost of renting. Types of housing appropriate in rural areas. We asked folks, what they saw as being appropriate. Farm, ag-related residents, single-family homes, and clustered or conservation subdivisions. 67% of new residential subdivisions, or I should say 67% of respondents identified that new residential subdivisions should be developed in communities where public water and sewer are available. Okay. Not that 67% of new, but 67% of respondents to the survey identified that new residential subdivision should be developed where public water and sewer is available. 54% next to communities where water and sewer could be extended, right? So maybe focusing kind of our denser development or new residential development near where public water and sewer is available. We also had conducted a survey to the city of Menominee, villages, and the towns. Not all got back to us. Many of the towns did, city did, a few villages. We will be holding a village focus group. And so perhaps we'll get some additional information that will feed into this. 4 of the 7 towns responded that they anticipate more houses and population growth. Town priority challenges to address include road maintenance, loss of lands with high ag value, and groundwater quality or nitrates. Now you say, well, these things aren't housing related issues, and they aren't directly, but they do relate to residential development and housing, right? So we do need to consider that if we start, adding several miles of local roads in our towns, that those are more roads to maintain. Loss of lands with high ag value, groundwater quality, nitrates, right? I've had conversations with Chase, whereas we do have some higher nitrates in the county. Where is it appropriate for residential development to locate? And so we do need to, consider those things. While not directly a housing related, item, it's important that we bring those into the conversation. City and village surveys. Focus on creating more housing opportunities for development, housing shortages for workers, moderate income seniors. So your cities, your villages are where the infrastructure might be in place to focus some higher density housing. Now, recognizing you don't have regulatory authority when it comes to zoning, when it comes to land division, when it comes to, just land use regulations, those are handled by your city and your villages. So you are somewhat, limit, but you can provide, and we talked about this when we had our intergovernmental cooperation discussion. You can certainly encourage things, you can advocate for things, but sometimes your regulatory authority just isn't there to do certain things. So also city village comments, aging population, youth relocating, aging housing stock, lack of housing diversity, limited new construction. So when we look at how much new housing has occurred and been built in the county, we're kind of behind a little bit in terms of where our demand is, and affordable housing needs. And when I say behind in the county, I don't mean that's countywide. So that's not saying we just need to go and build a bunch of houses, on prime farmland. And it's all about balancing, right? Balancing things. And so that's where we're at. So again, some common themes from all of this, kind of emphasis on residential growth and location, housing availability, variety, and affordability. And those things really go hand in hand, right? If those vacancy rates are at a higher percentage within that healthy range, generally speaking, you might see that housing costs, if there's more available, supply and demand, the prices might start to fall, right? Now, there are many things that play into that are beyond our control. The cost of materials, the cost of labor, interest rates, right? A lot of variables that go into it. Promoting environmental stewardship. So again, thinking about our farmland, our natural resources, our, groundwater, maintaining fiscal responsibility and infrastructure readiness, right? And so making that sure that we have sound kind of development occurring in the county. So those are kind of the common themes. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of at least data and things to think about that kind of fed into how we drafted and why we drafted the goals, objectives, policies, and strategies as such, right? So all of those things, we sifted through all of that data, and that's what led us to put together draft goals, objectives, policies, and strategies. I will note these were drafted with input. So, our focus groups that we're conducting, we utilized your existing Dunn County Housing Worker Group and your housing action team. So Tammy and I attended both of those meetings within the last month, I think, and presented some draft goals, objectives, policies, and strategies to those work groups for their feedback and input, right? And so that is what was included in your packet, had kind of been reviewed and updated based on the input and the conversation from those two groups. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this. We have talked about goals, objectives, policies, and strategies, recognizing your policies are kind of ongoing tasks, decision-making, strategies are actionable tasks. If we need to go back to that, we certainly can. 2010, your 2010 comprehensive plan, I mentioned it has the required housing element, and I've noted the pages that kind of reflect those goals, objectives, policies. Perhaps you've taken a look at them, right? And I know a lot of work was probably done on those. One of the main things that came up, I think one of the very first comments at the housing work group when we started talking about these was, well, what's been done on these since we adopted this back in 2010? Who moves this forward, right? And excellent question, right? I think some of the things, as Tammy and I were referring to it, for example, refer to things that we're not entirely sure what they are, right? And they're not flushed out or kind of detailed in the plan. So for example, encourage development to locate in smart growth, quote, areas. I can't find the term smart growth area really anywhere else in the plan that helps kind of elaborate or further define that, right? So I think as we were drafting these goals, objectives, policies, we kept that in mind. We want things to be clear, and we want, our policies, our strategies to be very clear in terms of what the county's kind of, actions, what they'd like to see as far as policies and strategies. So What we did discuss though was that the county does have this housing work group that is in, and has been in place, I think, since 2023. And now you have an economic development coordinator that's kind of also kind of helping shepherd some of those groups. And so that's really a body that can hopefully help to kind of revisit these items, maybe annually. We discussed that maybe as part of your implementation plan. Again, that's a future element where we'll be taking all of the policies and strategies from the plan and putting together that action plan, that perhaps there is a, implementation item where all of your, well, at a minimum, that this body review the plan annually, right? But maybe some of your work groups at the committee, whether it's the housing work group, whether it's, maybe it's your, I can't think of the Economic Development Committee, right? That they review those strategies. Where are we at? Where are we to make sure that the plan keeps moving, that we're at least revisiting it and seeing kind of a check-in, annual check-in where we're at on things. So you can see from, and I'm sure if you took a look, the draft goals, objectives, policies that are in front of you looks very different, right? It's much more comprehensive. That's we really tried to flush out what are those kind of objectives, meaning what are the issues that we're trying to tackle, right? And that's based on all of the previous information that I shared. So it's much more comprehensive in nature. So you can see we have our housing goal. Dunn County will support a balanced, adaptable housing market that meets the needs of residents at all life stages and income levels, while supporting responsible growth, protecting productive lands, and preserving rural character. From there, and I'm not, unless you want me to, I'm not going to go through and read all 14 objectives. This is included, what's on the screen is included in the meeting packet online for those folks that are maybe watching online. You can see though, we've identified 14 objectives, and those objectives are hopefully, measurable, or at least working towards addressing those and identifying and addressing those issues that we've identified. We have drafted 11 policies there. Again, those are decision-making guidance, and those policies and strategies are meant to kind of support those objectives, those 14 objectives that we have. We also have a long list of strategies that are very detailed, and so maybe you've taken a look at that at your place, and this was not included in the packet online. After we met with the housing action team, Tammy and I chatted and said maybe and some of this stems from our previous conversations as well. How can we make sure that our strategies are, kind of to the point and maybe grouped, right? And so at your place, we did take another look at the strategies in particular that we presented, those 12 strategies. And in what we did is we are considering, and I've shared that at your place, and I'd be interested in your feedback. That's a standalone handout that was put at your place. But some revised strategies, perhaps considering opportunities to shorten up, right? And I think this was mentioned. I think Diane mentioned it at our previous meeting when we talked about historical resources. How can we kind of shorten or button things up while still making sure that we're comprehensive enough, right? And achieving kind of what we want to see in the plan, and maybe grouping strategies. And so what we've done is we've taken the strategies, and you can see here there were 12, but for example, 5 had, 7 different kind of sub points underneath it. So that's why we went from 12 to 15, because we did pull a few things out, but we've tried to group them. So regulatory and planning review, partnerships and education, incentives and demonstration projects, sustainability and energy, and kind of monitoring and advocacy. So to help make it a little more maybe user-friendly, easier for implementation from your staff, from other partners, just from citizens understanding, instead of seeing a long kind of list, grouping them, and we probably follow suit perhaps with future elements, right? Grouping those strategies to make it kind of easier to understand. I guess that's what I have prepared on this item. I'm happy to walk you through, but I'm going to defer to maybe you, Mr. Chair, in terms of how you'd like the conversation to move forward.
Sure. Thank you, Susan.
Question?
Let's start with any questions the committee might have.
Okay, I see that the jobs in Menominee, like 25% are coming from outside areas. Now, is that considered like rental or home ownership or
Yeah,
know?
so are you referring
the front
to?
page there?
Yep, this diagram right
Yep.
here. Yep. So on and I don't know if you can pull it up, but on the Dunn County Housing Snapshot, and we'll make sure that this gets uploaded to the county's comprehensive, it's not in the slide presentation. It's on the housing snapshot, which was a handout. We'll make sure that that gets uploaded to the county's comprehensive plan kind of project page so that everyone can see that. But what is being referred to is the inflow outflow of job counts. Now, that's not specific. This is not specific to the city of Menominee. This is Dunn County data. Okay. It's centered around Menominee because Menominee is in the center of your county, right? And so what the data shows is that about 38% of Dunn County residents who are employed have a primary job inside Dunn County. Well, 62%, so most of your like resident workforce population is leaving the county for work. When we talk about economic development, I'll probably provide some more specific details. Where are those folks headed, right? But recognizing that of your approximately 20,000 folks, and this is 2022 data and it's primary job. So if you have a second job, a part-time job at night, that data is not reflected in this. About 20,000 folks, we'll say, who live in Dunn County, work, okay, or are employed and are reported in employment to the Longitudinal Employer Household Dynamics Survey, which is through the Census Bureau. All right, so it's estimated there's 20,000 people, about 8,000, so about a third, right, live and work in Dunn County. Okay, about 2/3 are leaving Dunn County for work, right? Many of them are probably headed to the Chippewa Valley, or perhaps they're even headed west, right? So don't let that arrow on the graph make you think that everybody's headed to the east, because that's not true. Similarly, about 10%, about 10% of Dunn County workforce commutes in from Eau Claire County, 8% from St. Croix County. So you also have folks that are coming in. You actually have more folks coming into work, at least per 2022. More folks are coming into the county from outside. They don't live in Dunn County, but they live elsewhere and they're coming in for work than you do have folks who are living and working in Dunn County, right? There may be a variety of reasons, right? You can't all point that all to housing. It might be school district. It might be my spouse works in Eau Claire. And so we live on the west side of Eau Claire, and I commute to Dunn County for work, right? So there's a variety of reasons, but for some, it might be because they can't find housing that they can afford here too, right? And so affordability does come in, and availability, right? It all factors into that equation. And I think, your economic development coordinator would echo that from what he's heard, is that it is hard for, some workers to find housing that fits their needs here in the county. Or at least in the community in which they're living, in which they're working. Does that help?
Yeah, because I seen where, like Walmart was, advertising a lot that they want people to come in at exit 45 at the distribution center.
For work?
Yeah.
So they're trying to
bringing in
recruit.
from a larger area, of the Eau Claire Station.
Mm-hmm.
They're coming in to,
Sure.
that. So is a housing study, do they consider outside areas homes? I mean, as residents outside the county, do they consider there's maybe 10% of people that don't live in the county, but yet they still work in the county?
I'm not sure that I understand the question.
Question is, people that live outside of the county,
Yeah.
are they focused living there and then working in Dunn County? Or are they just there temporarily until they find something in Dunn County?
Yeah, excellent question. There isn't a solid data source that can get to the reason for them living outside of the county, right? I think there's a variety of factors, right? Some are living there by choice. Some are living there because it fits their lifestyle. Others are there because they can't find anything else, right? That maybe they can afford or that they want or desire, right? So I think it's a culmination of factors. I can't confirm or point to, reasons why 10% of the Dunn County workforce commutes in from Eau Claire County, right? I can't confirm that. Mm-hmm.
I was curious about the metric that you mentioned for defining overcrowded housing.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm understanding right, it's if the number of individuals is greater than the number of bedrooms.
So it's actually if there's more than 1.1, and I think I said one previously, but 1.1 persons per room. So it's not bedroom, it's room.
Okay, okay.
Yep.
All
Yep. So it would include your kitchen, and that's a federal definition from the census that they use.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. 1.1 persons per room.
Okay. A thorny issue concerns what kind of housing is compatible with rural character.
Mhm.
That's come up
Mhm.
in this committee a
Sure.
few times.
Yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned how the old objectives like had a lot of question marks, areas that weren't fleshed out, right? And so I see that, one of our objectives here talks about developing housing compatible with rural character. And I don't know how you would even define that, or if it needs to be defined, but it's something that I'm wondering about how to make this document more effective where that's concerned.
I would think that, part of our process here would work, I feel we need to define rural character, right? It's a reoccurring theme. It was in the previous comp plan. It'll be in the land and water plan. There's many plans that, right, identify that. So I would hope through this process, we really come up with a definition that we all, that there's a consensus on.
Mhm.
And, even, light at the last meeting where we had that rezone, maybe real character is design standards, right? So the look of the structure, should an industrial building that's being constructed in a rural farmland be a certain color? Does that maintain a rural character? Density, what would be an acceptable density? Are a couple examples of how we could manage and make that rural character component.
And I would just add, and we kind of dove in a little bit at our last meeting when I was here. Maybe it wasn't your last meeting, but the meeting that I was last here when we talked about historical and cultural resources and what does, when we talk about culture and rural character, and you're right, that has come up, and we had a kind of what does that mean to different folks, right? And certainly that ties in. What I would say is, we try to, and you're right, objective. It would be,
I think it was stick.
yeah,
Yeah.
I found it there. Yes. So 6, encourage residential development patterns compatible with rural character. Based on at least on the survey results, right? And again, that's just one piece of data. The survey results, regardless of who is responding, it's not a vote, right? It's just data that it's just meant to provide information. But those survey results did allude to, some interest in kind of what at least those who responded, what they find to be appropriate residential development, right? And so it was, single family homes, agricultural, farmsteads, and then maybe that clustered conservation kind of subdivision design. So taking up less land and concentrating, right? It is more compact in that it's concentrating homes, but it is then preserving additional kind of agricultural lands. I won't call it open space because that can mean a bunch of different things to people. But that is, and so the policies and strategies and I'd have to take a little bit deeper look here. But we do say, yeah, there are a few kind of policies and strategies, I think, that attempt to tie back to that objective, right? Because that's what we want to make sure is that we're not just throwing objectives out there without having kind of compatible or I should say, coordinated policies or strategies that work to achieve that objective. So, yeah, I think Tammy mentioned one. We do say promote, planned unit developments, conservation subdivisions, clustered housing to preserve open space, reduce infrastructure costs, and maintain rural character. Directing higher density housing towards the incorporated areas or clustered rural hamlets. That does lead into where you're directing those. If you want something more specific or more, it's always how you could require certain things if that is the wish of the body, right? You could say, require new subdivisions to we've taken a little bit kind of softer approach by saying promote the use of these things. You could require certain things, right? So it's kind of what does this body feel is appropriate. Does that help?
It does help.
Okay.
Thank you. And I appreciate
Yeah.
Tammy's insight
Yeah.
as well.
Yep.
I was wondering, so you're collaborating a lot with the 2 county housing teams. I'm just wondering, does the issue of compatibility with rural character come up in those discussions within those groups at all?
It didn't. I don't think that it did as part of the housing work group. I don't recall it being mentioned. Now, they did see that we had, they received the draft goals, objectives policy, so perhaps it didn't come up because they felt it was appropriately incorporated. I don't know. The housing action team, I would say that action team, and I don't know how much you folks know about all your different bodies, but that action team really is a group of many different kind of community, housing supportive partners that come together to really focus on housing from the health needs assessment. So they're really focused on one of their main focuses. I shouldn't say that their only focus. One of their primary focus is providing housing for housing insecure folks, right? And supportive services. So in that regard, I don't recall the rural character coming up as part of that housing action team.
Yeah.
Another thing I just want to note, and I should have noted this at the beginning, is, by us reviewing and discussing these today, you're not taking any formal action on these. You're not saying this is it. We're going to continue to have conversations, right? You can't talk about housing, or you can't talk about land use, right? And we're going to be having a whole detailed conversation on the land use. You can't talk about land use without talking about residential development, right? And so I think that's why it's comprehensive, and that's why things have to fit together. So we might uncover, as we're having future conversations, it would be really good for us to add a policy in the housing element on this. Well, we can do that. Just because we don't, but what I would like is a general feedback, right? Or specific feedback on, are there specific does this goal represent and reflect what, you think it should? Are there specific changes you'd like to see made? Certainly we'll note that rural character, and that'll come up probably, like Tammy mentioned, it needs to be defined. What does that mean? And how are the elements of the plan kind of tying back and working towards that, and kind of complementing what you folks see as rural character for Dunn County.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate all of this. So it hadn't occurred to me that, like, the housing groups, they have a lot of great ideas for increasing housing supply and all of these things. But like, if their ideas don't have the buy-in of what constitutes rural character, then it's not going to fly on PR&D when we try to implement those changes, right? And so that should be part of the conversation too. So anyway, thanks.
Yeah.
One question on the St. Croix River over by Hudson. I thought at one time I read where houses had to be painted like a certain color for rural character. Is that still, are you going to have it like all Amish? They gotta be painted all white?
I can jump on that one. So the St. Croix River is different in that it's a national scenic riverway, And so
Oh,
it's actually, not many people realize that the St. Clair River is actually part of the national park system. And so those are design standards that are meant to blend, those structures are meant to blend in with a natural palette, color palette, that is, maintaining that scenic,
okay.
scenic character of the river.
Thank you.
So it's a similar concept though that we would go with as far as rural character and design standards for structures in the zone townships.
And I would just add to that, I mean, you do have communities where they maybe don't have design standards, right? I can think of in the city of Hudson, and not part of the scenic riverway area of Hudson, but there was, and maybe you've read a few years ago, pink houses, right? There were a few, I think, and they're still there in the city of Hudson, and that raised some big concerns, hot pink, bright pink, houses, right? So the city of Hudson probably doesn't have design, right? They aren't regulating that, right? But that'll be something that this body, and not that the comprehensive plan will detail out what those design guidelines are, right? But I do think as part of that rural character discussion, one of the kind of implementation strategies to help ensure that you're kind of working towards maintaining that rural character will be to establish some design guidelines. Again, the comprehensive plan doesn't get that far detailed into what those standards are. The county, including you folks, will need to further flesh those out and determine what's best for Dunn County.
So just a couple of things. I really like the idea of breaking this down into objectives and strategies, and the strategies providing us with sort of a framework for how we're actually going to potentially take action on
Mhm.
these things,
Mhm.
which we didn't have before. So I think you answered my question, but so over the past couple of years, we've established the Housing Action Team and the Housing Work Group. Do we need to, and what I like about that is that those are organized within the framework of county government. So they have county staff,
Mhm.
county committees that are providing input and support, and not just operating on their own and then depending upon some vague process to get access to the decision making. So I really like having those in here. It may be that we want to think about how we could clarify those a little bit more to provide better uh, implementation, of the better advice and implementation. Um, I think all the questions everybody else had, I think are good. I think Tammy brought up, well, and last time at our meeting, we had I think, as far as I can remember, a unique situation where we had a request to rezone a property in a rural town into an industrial classification. And uh, that raised, as Tammy pointed out, that raises the question of what does that mean as far as rural character? I mean, it's like, okay, this could be like so not compatible with rural character, or it could be. But are there, and we don't have to do it today, obviously, but as we go through this, are there elements within our zoning code that could use better definition so that we can, if there is desire, and the part of this case was the township supported it, to rezone an area into something like industrial. Uh, can we assure that that is done in a way that protects, as much as possible, protects the rural character of the community? Just something to put on the table. You brought it up, Tammy, and I think so that may mean that we may want to include and I don't know whether we do or not, but include a strategy
Mhm.
that involved reviewing our standards for some zoning categories that
Mhm.
would better accommodate the desires of the community. And then I guess the other question I have is, like all the things we're talking about, primarily apply to, uh, towns and villages and whatever, but towns in particular, the county role, that have bought into county zoning. And it may be that the world is changing in ways that we need to provide some, and when we move into the discussions with townships and stuff, need to say, look, what are you looking at here that may change or have an impact on how you view whether to participate in county zoning, whether there are ways to participate in county zoning that are not totally in or totally out, but maybe reflect some of the characters. I don't know. I don't have any idea whether that's even possible, but we seem to have come over the years, things have happened that have surprised us. We've seen um, the development of very large livestock operations. And the law limits us, does not allow us to consider any limitations on size. Um, we've seen proposals to develop uh, uh, non-metallic mining, large projects, and have made adjustments at the county level in zoning to require certain overlay zoning to give us a better ability to handle that. And as uh, Supervisor Cook brought up in his introductory comments, there are probably going to be others. And one possibility would be, I don't actually see that uh, large industrial development like data center development is likely to happen in very rural areas. We don't know for sure. And do we need to consider some ways that development can be framed in the context uh, of the rural character that people want to maintain? That's all. Just, you have any thoughts?
And I could just, related to that, like our zoning code, right? The standards that we currently have or those uses that we allow in our zoning ordinance are reflective of, what's in our comprehensive plan, what those what range are we willing to accept, right? So I would say we have a pretty restrictive zoning code now that doesn't allow for those intense land uses. So, if it was through this process that the desire is to start allowing it, then that, would have to come out in the comprehensive plan. But the fact that we do have a rural character element, even in our existing comprehensive plan, I feel is what shaped what we have currently in our zoning code.
So in zone townships, you feel like there would be, uh, I mean, we can look at it more further, but at least now we have considered that, and that is part of those elements are there to protect character now to a degree.
And in the zone townships, correct. I think there's an element of that. I mean, we don't have, again, like the design standard conversation, landscaping requirements, those are those other components, lighting standards.
Yeah.
Those are additional elements that
And that
help.
came up in the recent rezone where, we're going to be putting allowing an industrial use, not a really huge industrial use, but I think in an general ag area that is going to be it's going to have an impact on local residences and stuff. And so that, idea looking at whether our standards allow us to mitigate the impacts of that would be important.
Correct. Yep. So if that feels like that's a good element that we need to reflect in our land use portion of the comp plan for sure, and then part of the implementation section. It seemed really appropriate.
Anything else on this? Anything comes up to you, Tammy, that you want to highlight? Again, I think that I like the idea that we're establishing a process for addressing these strategies rather than just saying that they're out there. And that process has a connection to county government. We might want to clarify that because I think there is some confusion between the housing action team and the county housing work group, but I'm glad they're there. Thanks. Anything else? I'm going to ask, well, does anyone here in the public have anything they want to specifically address on this? Um, Yeah, why don't you, Randy, why don't you come up, say your name and address, and just a couple minutes if you want to share your.
Hi, good morning. Randy Knack, Mayor of the City of Menominee, 1419 Tainter Street, Menominee, Wisconsin. Um, Planning and development is so important for Dunn County, and I'm fearful right now that we might be up against a quandrum. Townships really have a hard time protecting themselves against big developments. They come in, they sweep it up. It's automatic. The city recently, as you know, has taken a move to annex some property and rezone it. I think what the sales pitch that was given to the city of Menominee was outstanding, but I think once the initial phase of that was over, I think a lot of the people that were involved in this decision-making process has been rethinking it. I certainly have been. I've been talking with other towns and cities that have turned down data centers, Indianapolis. I mean, there's a host of them. There's 84 of them across the United States. Data centers are something that we have to really keep an eye on because once they come in, you can't stop the second and the third one. They're looking at 320 acres of beautiful farmland becoming a data center. This is really something that I would hope that Dunn County would take a look at land use and really maybe put their foot down and say, hey, maybe not right now, maybe not here, maybe a moratorium against data centers. I know we did it with sand mines. There's got to be something done. I just want to touch a little bit too on the housing situation because I drive a school bus in the morning and in the old Homer's Trailer Court, there was 30 lots available. There's approximately 150 homes, rentals available right now on Zillow. And there's several hundred homes also available in Dunn County. So I know marketing is one thing and producing more homes is another. But I think, I don't know if we're in a crisis mode or we just need to do a better job overall. But I just wanted to mention that I'm really concerned about this data center thing. And I hope that we can maybe come together as a community and work on this project. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to say something at this point in time? Short, briefly. Bob, do you want to do it? Okay.
I'm sorry, I failed to give my address earlier. E6477 490th Avenue, Menominee. Bob Cook, Town Chairman of Red Cedar. And what I want to impress upon the PRD is the urgency of pushing something forward because there is a time limit. I believe Randy had brought me up aware of that for anything to be done about the existing proposed data center. So we really do need to push this moratorium forward to the county. And if we consider that we are a rural agricultural area, the county does that. The city even acknowledged that Menominee is a rural agricultural area. Put your money where your mouth is. If we keep on losing large chunks of land, we will no longer be a rural community. And I was told that Balloonist has offered one of the farmers that involved in the buyout, buy all the land you can get your hands on, we'll pay you a premium for it. Because there are competing data centers that want to follow in. It's the flavor of the month right now. We've been through it with sand mines, solar panels, and now data centers. Thank you.
I wonder, yeah, but, oh, okay, yeah, sure, okay. Name and address.
Yeah.
Hit the button.
Sorry, Mike, yeah,
Is that better?
that's perfect.
All right. My name is Michael Lawler. I live at N6844 558th Street. And I'm here to support some of the comments just made in regards to the data center issue. I live about 1 mile west of where this facility would be built. And I've talked to many of our neighbors. My wife has as well. And we're very upset about this possibly coming very close into our neighborhood. We're not citizens of of Menominee. We live in Red Cedar. And as a consequence, we don't have much say about what the city does in our neighborhood now that that land has been annexed. And we're very concerned about water loss. We have a well, as does all of our neighbors. We have our own septic system, as do all of our neighbors. And we're very concerned about water usage and what they would do with all that water once it was used by a data center. And if you know anything about data centers, you understand that they have a number of issues, mostly of which are negative, that involve the use of water. When it comes to noise, we know that they produce a lot of noise, and that could potentially be mitigated, but most of these companies make promises that they never keep, and it's very hard to control those sorts of issues. In addition to that, there's air pollution. There's going to be not as many jobs as people think might be coming into the area, and many of the higher paying jobs are done off-site. And so you'll end up with a bunch of janitors, you'll be have some maintenance crews, and you'll have some ground maintenance folks. And that's probably about the limits. And I don't know if Menominee needs any more low-paying jobs when we've heard some of the issues related to housing here today. We need people coming in that can afford to for one thing, pay for these expensive rental costs as they have escalated over the years. But we also need, if we're going to build, we want to build nice homes that look like they fit into the community and aren't eyesores for everything else. So I'm going to keep it at that because I could go on and on and on all day. And I certainly am supporting all of the efforts of my neighbors, of Bob, of Randy. I really thank Randy for everything he's done in putting a pause on what's going on in the city. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'll, one more, okay. And then we'll have to move on. Name and address.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. My name is Jody Cromery. I live at 934A Tainer Street, North Menominee. I study data centers for about 3 hours of each day ever since I heard this was coming to my hometown, possibly. Eventually, data centers become autonomous, so the jobs they promise is kind of not completely factual. The eventual money that they promise, they typically pull out before they have to pay it. They describe that the technology has become obsolete and they move on and they abandon the building. Menominee loves development, but a data center with the impacts on health, environmental impacts, and pollution impacts is totally different comparing development from Anderson Windows coming in, which we love, and the Walmart DC, which we love coming in. The experts are not you and I, and the experts aren't the balloonist lawyers on data centers. What I really study are people that already live next to data centers or have them in their counties. And being a data analyst myself, the number one comment that they all state is, my life is hell now that this data center has came into our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Okay. I think we're good. Okay. Um, thank you all for being respectful of time and stuff. Appreciate that. Uh, we, as a committee, uh, do not, as we understand it, do not have direct authority or regulatory authority over the current proposal. As far as I know, that's what we've been, that's our understanding, that's what we've been told. Uh, we, what we have talked about is uh, before we would take any action, it would be good to first get clarity on ourselves about what the process would be for the county, were there to be a proposal for a data center, a new data center development. And I think we will do that. We will have our staff basically sort of walk through, perhaps at our next meeting or at an upcoming meeting, what the process would be if there were that kind of proposal in a zone township that was not the current proposal, and then make some assessment as to whether or not that's sufficient to meet the needs of the community and the desires of the community or not. I think it's going to be difficult for us to, and I'm just speaking for myself. The committee can talk about this when we get further into it, maybe on our next agenda. But I think it's going to be difficult for us to do a legal moratorium when we don't have, that would have any impact on the current proposal. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but we don't want to take an action that's not within the law or meaningful to the citizens. So I think we will look at this, and if there's action such as a moratorium that makes sense, then we'll consider it. If there's action that makes sense with regard to clarifying our regulations and our processes for future development, we'll look at that. But for now, I think we'll move on. We can. So thank you all for the thoughtful comments. Go ahead.
Would it be appropriate to, given this conversation, to actually jump into the other portion of our comp plan discussion
Yes,
related to intergovernmental cooperation?
yes.
And
That's where some of this may come up. Yeah.
yep,
Okay, let's do that.
Great. Well, thank you. And thank you to the public for all of their comments. Intergovernmental cooperation, we had at one of our last meetings, we did have a detailed discussion about intergovernmental cooperation and some of the counties' role. We talked about city of Menominee, surrounding towns. What can we do? The comment was made, we can't require certain things, and that's true, but we can encourage, right? And we can state that we will work to foster, trust and communication. So in your packet, our draft goals, objectives, policies, and strategies related to intergovernmental cooperation. So I'll just read the goal and then we can dive in. And if you have any comments or feedback, so strengthen intergovernmental cooperation in Dunn County by fostering open communication, cost-effective service sharing, coordinated land use and infrastructure planning, and joint efforts that promote orderly growth while respecting the unique identity and decision-making authority of each community. And so we have drafted 6 objectives for your consideration, right? Related to fostering trust, enhancing service delivery and cost savings, right? By sharing resources, hopefully we can reduce some cost, encouraging aligned planning, zoning, and boundary agreements to protect farmland, rural character, and community identity while promoting orderly development. I know our conversation at when we had this discussion on intergovernmental cooperation was that there is a kind of a I don't know if it's probably more than maybe a handshake, but it's not a formalized boundary agreement is my understanding between the city of Menominee and shared towns. Maybe that's something that the county wants to encourage is that they do enter into a cooperative boundary agreement that's a formal agreement. Some other objectives there, encouraging proactive uh, conflict resolution, promoting civic engagement and participation. You can then see we have drafted 9 policies. And I'll just point out a few. Again, the county encourages, you can't require it, but joint planning and cooperative boundary agreements in areas along municipal borders. That, while that draft policy is a result of our conversation about City of Menominee, that would also apply to villages, perhaps, with surrounding towns. And we'll be having that village focus group meeting, and we'll be able to get a better handle on, the intent and the future plans of our villages. So you can see there the other draft policies and then strategies. We have drafted 8 strategies holding, at least one countywide forum. So again, that gets back to that communication, right? And I think that came up quite a bit in our work session was, communication and understanding, and annually meeting with towns, villages, and the city and other partners to discuss efforts and kind of bring folks together. Identifying services that could be more cost effective, and formalizing those arrangements, along with some other things, continue to strengthen partnerships between the county, city of Menominee, and UW Stout on economic development initiatives. So that's one area where I think that's like a prime example of intergovernmental cooperation and kind of, and it maybe perhaps some outside partners as well, but one where many folks, City of Menominee, Dunn County, instead of both having a economic development coordinator, partnered together with the university, right, to create this kind of one position that serves all. Actively, the other strategy that ties with that is actively engaging, right? So actively engage the City of Menominee and neighboring towns in discussions towards formal cooperative boundary agreements. So that is drafted as a specific strategy, to encourage and actively engage them. So a little bit more beyond encourage, you can't require, but to really stress that importance based on some of these more recent conversations and probably historical conversations as well. So again, open to would love to hear your thoughts, your feedback, any changes, anything that we should consider in addition to this. Again, you're not formally approving them, these goals, objectives, policy, strategies today, but we would appreciate your feedback so that we can make those changes if you do have any, but we'll continue to build on them throughout the rest of the process.
Okay. So the committee's had a chance to read through this, I think, ahead of time. Any observations or questions? So let's,
I have some,
yeah,
sorry.
I'm sorry.
Well, I see that we have, some representatives, the chair of the town of Red Cedar, and the mayor. I'm actually interested in hearing what you might have to say before you.
I can be late.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you have a minute, I was gonna ask for your. Okay, yeah, I think that, this development, proposed development is kind of highlighting some difficulties with the intergovernmental cooperation between City of Menominee and Town of Red Cedar. And my understanding of the process leading up to this, it seemed like you had a nice cooperation going. You had those meetings maybe 4 times a year, and you worked on that map, and and the maps went back to the towns for approval, and there were a lot of meetings to develop that. And so it seemed like there was a nice situation going forward, and then this happened, and it's kind of a mess. And I would appreciate some comments, I guess.
Sure, and thank you. Yes, the townships and the city of Menominee, I think, has had an outstanding relationship. One of the difficulties that we ran into is, when the, landowners came to the city of Menominee requesting, that it be annexed into the city. We're forced by state law to take that up to the city council. And then, of course, annexing it and rezoning it follows it right behind its tail wings. And yes, that was unfortunate to, for the city of Menominee and to the townships. I think now in retrospect, maybe we could have done some things different. But I know that there is a land use map, but it's not exactly how you think it should be. It's circles and squares and, oh, we're gonna do this and here and we're gonna do that there. But the communication on this particular data center thing, I think, was so abrupt that I think it definitely, sliced our relationship with the townships, and I apologize for that. Again, you got to realize that these big companies and these attorneys, they're 200 attorneys or whatever they have, know how to do this. So they're going to put the landowners up to requesting annexation. The city has to review it. They're leaps and, but they have more money than Dunn County. And once they get to Dunn County, they will own Dunn County. They've already established that with the city of Menominee, and that if I went to planted my feet in the soil as hard as I did, we would be already further down the road than we are. Rethinking the whole thing, I wish we could have done it differently. I'm not sure how we would have done it. But future developments and future relationships with the townships has to be, a one-on-one conversation. How do we do this? What's your recommendation? I've worked with the other townships. I mean, Bob Cook is amazing as town chair, and he calls me, or I'll call him back, along with all the other town chairs. So I think Menominee can rebuild that relationship that's been destroyed a little bit in this current development. But that just tells you how serious this situation is. And if one data center comes, 3 data centers are going to come. So anyway, but any other questions?
Well, you mentioned that the state's process then kicked in once a certain, can you explain that a little bit?
Yes, when the landowners themselves come and ask for annexation, we are bound over to have to take that to council. So if it was the city of Menominee reaching out to landowner A, B, or C and saying, hey, we want to annex your land, it's a total different mechanism to have to deal with that. So we were hands were tied at that point by the state of Wisconsin.
You didn't have to approve the annexation, but you had to consider it.
Correct. And then with the sales pitch that was put on our city council.
I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions from the committee for the mayor?
So the idea of a cooperative boundary agreement, like a formalized agreement, has come up as being something that might protect against this sort of situation in the future. I'm wondering why wasn't there that formalized cooperative agreement in this case?
Well, I think generally speaking, it is a handshake.
Mhm.
It is a, gentleman's agreement, more style. And I think, and Bob's got his hand up back there, and I think generally speaking, the city of Menominee and the townships are very versed in caring and sharing. I think this one took us all blindsided. Really. I don't know if Bob's got his hand up, but.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from. I'm sorry, I don't have the authority to call him up. So
I authorize you to. Yeah, no, Bob, why don't you come up and talk? Dan, you want to say something?
Thank you. And I'll stick around for a while too, if you need
Sure.
any help.
I can call them. Yeah. No, I understand. And Monica understands that too. Yeah. No,
thanks.
I'm requesting Mr. Cook to share his thoughts.
Again, Bob Cook, Red Cedar Chair. We did have what we called a gentleman's agreement with the city of Menominee. And as Randy pointed out, the overlay maps, we've got the airport overlay, and we've got areas that we figure are just residential, some are light industrial. And we always thought that the land along Highway B could be suited for more than just farming. And we originally had it drawn on our map as being 40 acres to the east, not not the whole area that's been determined by this last sale. And we envision that to be mom and pop type businesses, something that would be 10, 15, 20 acres, or possibly even 40, with multiple jobs because of the good highway location and because of infrastructure costs being so high. Putting another road off of there costs the developer a lot of money, where we could keep them right onto Highway B. But when the city annexed it in, and I read the article in the paper by Dave Schofield that said, we are not bound by township zoning because we had it listed as light industrial and agricultural. We're not, the city of Menominee is not bound by our comprehensive plan. And as far as the gentleman's agreement, when a gentleman's agreement, we look at that like a handshake deal. But when you sign non-disclosure agreements, and we've known about something going in that area for the last 2 years because of the soil borings that were done out there and the crops that were destroyed. No one could speak about it, even though they were asked in the city town meetings for the last year, what's going on? We don't know anything, they said. So that has gone a long way to destroy the relationship between the town of Red Cedar and the city of Menominee. And unfortunately, that's going to affect us for some time to come here now, because that means more roads will now be jointly owned by the city and the town. That means that cooperation agreements are going to have to be made for maintenance, upkeep, snow removal. And I know that the city has looked into a 29-acre parcel across from Henderson's on 708th. And the city asked the town if we would want to partner with them and rebuild 708th. And no, we don't have the money for that. That road works just fine for us the way it is now. We put a lot of money into upgrading it. I told the city, you have access to your city street. That's what you will use. I do not want to see business trucks coming out of there onto 708. That's a Class B road. These feathers are ruffled and they're going to stay that way for some time. And I know we got to work around it, but I'm hurt by it, and my residents are hurt. And I thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Any other thoughts from the committee on this?
I'd be interested in hearing at this future meeting where we're going to be taking this up more. I'd be interested in hearing more about formalized cooperative boundary agreements and whether they could be used to help protect Red Cedar from future problems like this.
Makes sense? Okay. And I think, like I said before, we are going to have a meeting with the towns, interested towns, to talk about the plan in both zoned and zoned towns. So the whole question of how, whether you choose zoning or not, can impact this kind of issue should be on the table for that. Anybody have any comments on this other than the fact that we need these items to have additional consideration on the strategies and the objectives? Okay. Then, you have anything else, you guys?
Nope, that's it really regarding the comprehensive plan. Our next steps will be before you. We are continuing to move forward with focus groups. Economic development is scheduled for October 21st, and that's a joint kind of meeting of the Greater Menominee Development Corporation and Dunn County Economic Development. So we're utilizing, again, existing bodies that work on economic development. So we'll be meeting with them. But again, that information will then be kind of brought forth, channeled through to you folks at a future meeting. So stay tuned as we continue to move forward through the process. And if you think of anything additional, any other questions, comments, always feel free to give me a shout by email or phone. So you'll likely see me again, maybe next month or in November. So, yeah, thank you.
All right, thanks. So we have a couple more items on our agenda. Let's see what is it? Consideration of actions, cooperative agreement with Beaver Creek Reserve. Chase, you want to take that?
You bet. So this is an agreement that we've done for probably the last 4 or 5 years with Beaver Creek Reserve. So they're just a quick reminder. This is for aquatic invasive species work within the county. The Department of Natural Resources about 5, 6 years ago created a program where they could provide funding to counties to support aquatic invasive species management activities within each county. Because of the dollar amounts that are coming through those, it would either be added to someone else's existing work or wouldn't necessarily pay for a full position. So there's been a really nice program that's been developed, and Beaver Creek Reserve is our cooperative agent for this, where counties within our surrounding area here basically sign over their funds that they would be normally allocated towards Beaver Creek to do this work. And these are funds that are specific for this type of work. They can't be used for anything else. So this is just we did this the last few years at this time of year to re-up the cooperative agreement with Beaver Creek to continue to do that aquatic invasive species work within the county. And my recommendation is to continue with that program. Again, there are no funds that come in to the county's budget for this. They directly deal with Beaver Creek Reserve, but all of their actions and activities are done on behalf of for Dunn County and Dunn County's waters. So I'd be happy to answer any other questions you might have on that.
Any questions, Chase? Gary?
Do we get a report from Beaver Creek then? Was it like 3, 4 times a year or, okay?
Yes, we do. We do have, we get a quarterly reports. I have the first and second quarter reports. I should have included one of those in the packet. I apologize for that. But we are expecting the third quarter report coming soon, and then we'll get one at the end of the year. So I can share those with you when we get those. Yep.
Any other questions? Could I have a motion to approve the agreement?
That motion?
Monica moves,
And I'll second that motion.
Gary seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor of approval, say aye. Opposed, say no. The agreement is approved. And the next item is resolution authorizing application for surface water grants. Again, Chase.
You bet. So from time to time, we come before you and then ultimately take this through county board for approval to authorize our department, me specifically, to apply for certain specific grants through the Department of Natural Resources. We've had 2 projects that have we've been working with on for, in some cases, many years, and are finally coming to a point where we'd like to advance those projects along through the application of a surface water restoration grant and surface water planning grants. So this resolution before you is basically authorizing our ability to apply for those grants on behalf of the projects as well as of the county to administer them. And in the background section of this resolution, you'll see that there are 2 specific projects. Tammy, if you wouldn't mind, I think below are a few documents that were included in the packet about each project. One is on the Red Cedar River, formerly known as Dobbs Landing, but it's we're calling it the Stewart Bank project now. So it's a riverbank restoration project that is a significant contributor to sedimentation within the Red Cedar River and ultimately into Tanner Lake. This has been a project that's been on our radar and we've worked on for many, many years. Typically, funding is one of the limiting factors. It is on private land, but is basically a raw riverbank that contributes a significant amount of sediment to the Red Cedar River. And I think below Tammy, there might be a couple pictures just to share too. Kind of what it looks like. It's pretty significant, pretty actively eroding. If any of you have paddled or flow to the Red Cedar. It's a pretty obvious spot on the Red Cedar River. The next project is a project down on Lake O'Galley. Would be on private property to also limit sedimentation within that lake near the boat landing that is owned and operated by Dunn County. It is a Pine View Park. We've been working with landowners and the Lake O'Galley Association as well as O'Galley Sportsman's Club to develop a project to reduce sedimentation there. So the first project I mentioned would be a surface water planning grant we're applying for, up to $10,000 to help do feasibility studies, get engineering started. In this particular project, this would be a surface water restoration grant. So this would be actually implementation. This award can go up to $50,000. In both projects, we have some monetary support coming from the first project will be coming from the Tanner Lake District. And in this project, we would have some monetary support also coming from the O'Galley Sportsman's Club. So still a lot of things to work out and iron out as far as the details, but there are some pretty good projects that can benefit the lake and the residents around there. The last thing I would mention regarding the first project and our relationship with the Tanner Lake District, I met with them again yesterday about this project. And they have basically offered and are asking if this committee would be interested in any report that they would have in the future of what they're working on, how that Lake District has developed since its inception.
Yeah,
So,
let's do that. That would be
Okay.
great.
So at this point in time, basically this resolution is for authorizing us to apply for these grants. We have submitted pre-applications already for them. They were due on September 15th with a formal application on November 15th. So I guess with your approval, this will move on up and you'll see this again at County Board on the 15th.
Do you need approval from us?
We do, yep.
So a motion to approve application for these grants?
I'll make that motion.
Gary, Monica seconds. Any discussion, questions?
Because this land is privately owned, are they under any obligation to like maintain any structures there? Because we are getting some private funds.
Correct, yeah. So a component of these projects would be some sort of a land use agreement or a operation and maintenance agreement that we would have. So in the second project, the one down on Lake O'Galley, we would be actually doing the design work for that. We have the capacity in-house to do those things. So most of those projects that we do, we have an operation agreement of a minimum of 10 years, typically is how those are cost shared. The first project is a little more intense. We don't have the capacity to work on riverbank restoration on the Red Cedar River because it's so large. Our federal partners don't have capacity on that either because the watershed is too big. So this would be a private engineer situation. So we would have a land use agreement with that landowner, given that public funds are coming into it for some maintenance. Yep.
Okay, any other questions? All in favor of approval, say aye. Opposed, say no. Application is approved. Any announcements? Next meeting is October 15th. And with that, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.